Allison Russo is the leader of the House's 31 Democrats who have chosen her to continue in that leadership position in the next General Assembly. We spoke before the end of Lame Duck. A lot of the things we talked about this time last year did not pass. Changes to recreational marijuana didn't pass. Changes to abortion legislation following the approval of the Reproductive Rights Amendment. Senate Bill 83, the higher education bill that was targeted at what Republicans think is and say is liberal ideology on college campuses. So at the end of this two-year session, what did get done? What didn't get done? What are you looking at as being, let's say, the positive that got done?
Well, I think, for me, a couple of those things not passing, it is positive. We minimize damage. The people spoke on the issue of adult use cannabis. Those new provisions have rolled out, and that's now available to Ohioans. Senate Bill 83, which I think is very damaging to higher education in the state. We've held that at bay so far. The anti-abortion legislation, I think we probably will start to see more of that again, but have been able to hold some of that stuff at bay. So from my perspective, that is not a bad thing. But, in terms of what did get done, I will remind you, we passed just hundreds of millions of dollars going out to our communities for those large transformational projects and as part of the capital budget. That was huge. Saw lots of good stuff get funded in communities. And, is there more work to be done? I could list all kinds of things that need to be done and should be done for everyday Ohioans. Yes. And we're still pushing those things.
This has been called the most unproductive legislature in half a century in terms of the number of bills that have passed. Is that fair? Do you agree with that assessment?
Well, I think, Karen, we have to look at as being unproductive. Again, you're stopping a lot of bad things. I think that's actually pretty productive. But also, I think we're seeing more and more pieces of legislation that maybe didn't make it across the finish line in the previous GA being added to the operating budget. The operating budget is becoming more and more of a policy document, more so than it probably has ever. And so in that respect, are we comparing apples and apples to apples here? I don't know. Certainly the division, especially amongst the majority caucuses and the division between the Senate and the House, has created some obstacles. But, it's I think we've gotten some good things done, still some damaging things that I wish had not passed, and some things we've held at bay.
What are the issues that you would like to have seen go forward? Democrats have talked about issues related to families, to women, some of these issues. What were you hoping would happen in this two-year session that you plan to potentially bring back?
Yeah, well, at the top of our list, and we've been talking about this for months, is real property tax relief for residents in our communities. There's not a single legislator in the General Assembly, both sides of the aisle, that does not hear directly from constituents about this issue. And so, we got something pretty small done this past week. It's good, but not enough. There's definitely more work that could be done. So we would like to see progress there. We would like to see more progress in the space of making sure that we have quality child care, affordable child care that is available. We continue to hear about that, not only from parents, working parents, but also from businesses who know that impedes productivity or the ability for especially working parents to be able to come back fully in to the workforce. And so we think that there's a lot more that can be done there. Of course, we are always pushing and on the watch for our public education funding, particularly for our disadvantaged students, and making sure that our schools and our students have the resources that they need to be good learning environments to build the future of Ohio.
I think reporters tend to focus on the things that you disagree on, the individual lawmakers disagree on, and the bills that spark the most controversy. But Representative Bill Seitz, who's on his way out the door, said on this show last week that there are more things that there is agreement on. Do you agree with that? Are there plenty of things that Republicans and Democrats actually do agree on?
I do. I fully agree with Representative Seitz on that. from my perspective, that yes, there's certainly a lot more that we can find compromise and agreement on that actually does good things for everyday Ohioans. My perspective is it doesn't matter if it's a Democrat or Republican idea. If it's a good idea, we should move forward with it. And I think we're up to 600 something bills just in the House. A lot of those are bipartisan. What I get really frustrated with, and I think the public rightfully so gets very frustrated with, is there is a tremendous amount of time in this body that is spent on those things that are incredibly divisive and that at the end of the day do absolutely nothing to improve the lives of everyday Ohioans.
We're doing these year-end interviews with you and Speaker Jason Stephens separately. He became Speaker in January 2023 with Democratic support and has fought with Republicans, the House Republican caucus ever since. House Democrats, though, haven't been thrilled with a lot of the things that have come forward under his speakership. What's your relationship been like with him over the last 2 years?
Well, listen, Speaker Stephens and I have a very cordial, good working relationship. I remind people I will be going into my third speaker as minority leader this next General Assembly. But, listen, what we ask, we understand we're in the minority. It's going to be incredibly difficult to get some of our ideas across the finish line. Doesn't mean that we don't keep trying and working, again, to find common ground and compromise. But, we simply ask that there's open lines of communication, mutual professional respect, because we do think, as we talked about earlier, lots of opportunities for agreement, good ideas that are coming from both sides of the aisle. For us, that is, for me at least, that is what matters most when we're trying to serve our communities and really what the people sent us here to do. And that is to do good things for our communities and for people.
Do you think the Speaker hears Democratic ideas, hears your members as you're proposing different bills and ideas?
Well, the current Speaker has been incredibly respectful. Again, lots of things we disagree about, things that I have been very unhappy that have gone across the finish line. But where we can find common ground, for example, on school funding, for example, or, getting infrastructure projects in our communities, he has always been very receptive to that. And I think that that's a good thing. Again, that's what most people want us to do. They want us to be functional adults and professionals here because that's what we were elected to do.
As you look forward, what's your hope next year under likely incoming Speaker Matt Huffman? He and his replacement as Senate President Ron McCauley seem very closely aligned on a lot of things. So it feels like it's going to be a different environment moving forward than Stephens and Huffman, who seem to be kind of blocking one or the other every now and then.
Well, listen, from my perspective, I'm going to approach President Huffman, incoming Speaker-elect Huffman, in the same way that, I would anytime I'm working with individuals and colleagues across the aisle. I still think that there are opportunities for certainly bipartisanship, for progress on areas that we align on. So, for example, President Huffman has been very good on the issue of criminal justice reform. We have several members who have interest in that space. I'm sure we will have lots of disagreement on public education and school funding on that issue. But I think that there are still opportunities, and I expect to continue to have a good working relationship regardless of who is Speaker.
Do you or any of your members fear that because of this relationship between the House and Senate next year, that whatever likely Speaker Huffman wants, he's going to get? There's nothing you can do about it?
Well, without a doubt, I think President Huffman will come into the House in a very powerful position. Listen, also, we just got through an election, and Republicans had a lot of wins in that election, and I'm sure they feel coming into this next General Assembly in particular that they have a mandate to do all kinds of things that I'm sure we are going to disagree with. But I think many of us who have been successful in these roles, we understand we can disagree on policy, we can have good debate, in disagreement on those issues, but you can still find common ground on some other things and have good working relationships with people.
You mentioned the election. Voters rejected the issue that would have created this 15-member Citizens Commission to draw state house and congressional maps. Because the current maps passed the Ohio Redistricting Commission unanimously, including with your vote, it seems those maps will stay in place until 2031 after the next census. I think that's still being discussed because it's never happened before, of course. You said you were hopeful that issue 1 would pass, and here we are. What are your thoughts going forward on redistricting?
So a couple of things, just to clarify. The maps that were passed last year only applied to the state legislative districts. So there is still this question of what to do with the congressional districts, which I anticipate are probably we're going to be back at the table again for the congressional map. So that remains to be seen. It will be under the current rules that are in the Constitution. I mean, listen, regarding issue 1, I feel wholeheartedly that most people, if they really understood and were not confused by the description that they saw in the ballot box, supported that issue. And in fact, we know that there were many people who intended to vote yes, but the language was confusing, and that was intentional. And so, many of the Republicans who were in positions to impact that vote, they used that power, and it was effective, and it confused voters. So I think, I think it probably will at some point come back up again. We'll see. That remains to be seen in terms of timing.
Do you expect anything to come up in the legislature? Governor Mike DeWine's talked about this Iowa-like plan. Do you expect something to happen in the legislature?
Well, that will be interesting. I think there are a lot of people, including Republicans, who are dissatisfied with the current process. Is it dissatisfaction enough now that issue 1 failed to go back and change it? I don't know.